Okay, so we left off on chapter 8. All right. Uh, Lutz Heck took over the Berlin Zoo from his distinguished father in 1931 and almost immediately began remodeling the zoo's ecology and ideology. To coincide with the 1936 Olympics held in Berlin, he opened a German zoo, an exhibit honoring the country's wildlife, complete with Wolf Rock at its center, surrounded by enclosures for bears, lynxes, otters, and other native species. This bold patriotic display underscoring the importance of familiar animals and that one needn't go to the ends of the earth to find exotic species conveyed conveyed a laudable message. And if he'd unveiled his exhibit today, his motives wouldn't be questioned. But given the era, his beliefs, and the ultranationalism of his family, he clearly wanted to please Nazi friends by contributing to the ideal of Germany's master races. A 1936 photograph shows Heck and Gor- Goring on a hunting trip to Shorefide. Shorefeed? Shorefeed. Heck's large preserve in Prussia, and the following year, Heck joined the Nazi Party. A big game hunter, Heck spent a lot Heck spent the peak moments of his life pursuing danger and adventure, several times a year launching trips to garner animals for his zoo and perhaps bag a pair of longhorn sheep's heads for his wall or come face to face with a towering mad female grizzly. He relished wild razor edged hunts, in Africa especially, which he recapped in scenic letters written by lantern candlelight, astride a camp stool near a well fed fire, while lions grunted invisibly in the blackness and his companions slept. The campfire flickering in front of me, he once wrote, and behind me, coming out of the dark infinity, the sounds of an invisible and mysterious wild animal. Alone and yet faintly haunted by circling predators, he would replay the day's exploits in ink, some to save, some to share with friends in another drape of reality. Uh, the, the Europe that seemed to him planets away. Action photographs often accompanied his letters, lassoing a giraffe, leading baby rhinoceros, leading a baby rhinoceros, capturing an aardvark, evading a charging elephant. Heck loved collecting trophies as memory aids to a wild part of his self that emerged in remote wilderness. Live animals to display at his zoo, dead animals to stuff, photographs to share and frame. In the heyday of his travels, he seemed to collect life itself, keeping voluminous diaries, snapping hundreds of photographs, and writing popular books such as Animals, My Adventure, which limned his passion for the wilderness, in which he detailed feats of extraordinary bravery, stoicism, and skill. Heck knew his strengths, admired the heroic in himself and others, and could tell a bar gripping story over drinks at annual meetings. Though he indulged in self mythology from time to time, his personality fit a profession which has always attracted some people with a yen for exploration, in flight from domesticity, and craving just enough ordeal to feel the threads of mortality fraying. Without his type, maps would still show a flat earth and no one would believe the source of the Nile. Sometimes Heck slayed dragons, or rather, their real life equivalents, but mainly he captured, photographed, and displayed them with gusto. Passionate and single minded, when he set his sights on an animal, either in the wild or belonging to someone, he lusted after it, tried every lure or ruse he could think of, and persisted until he exhausted the animal or wore down its owner. For decades, the Heck brothers had pursued a fantastic goal, a quest that engaged Heinz but completely infatuated Lutz: the resurrection of three pure blooded extinct species: the Neolithic horses known as forest tarpans, Oroshan, the wild now.
Here is what I found on the web.
I don't remember asking Bixby a question. Okay. All right. Anyway, okay, the Neolithic horses known as forest tarpans, Oroshan, the wild cow progenitor of all European cattle breeds, and the European or forest bison. On the eve of the war, the Hex had produced some near Arshan, that's a hard word, Arshan and Tarpans of their own, but the Polish strains ran truer to type, the clear inheritors. Only prehistoric creatures would do, ones untainted by racial mixing, and although Lutz hoped to gain influence and fame in the process, his motives were more personal. He sought the thrill of bringing extinct, nearly magical animals back to life and steering their fate, hunting more for sport. Genetic engineering wouldn't emerge until the 1970s, but he decided to use eugenics, a traditional method of breeding animals which showed specific traits. Heck's reasoning went like this: an animal inherits 50% of its genes from each parent, and even in extinct animals' genes remain in the living gene pool. So, if he concentrated the genes by breeding together animals that most resembled an extinct one, in time he would arrive at their purebred ancestor. The war gave him the excuse to loot East European zoos and wilds for the best specimens. As it happens, the animals he chose all thrived in Poland. Their historic landscape was Białowieża, and the imprimatur of a respected Polish zoo would legitimize his efforts. When Germany invaded Poland, Heck scouted the farms for mares preserving the most tarpon traits to mate them with several wild strains, including Shetlands, Arabians, and Przewalkis, hoping to breed back the ideal animal, the fierce, nearly unrideable horses painted in OCHRE. I'm not even gonna attempt that. It looks like ochre, but it might be ochre. On Cro Magnon caves. Heck assumed it wouldn't take many generations of backbreeding, maybe only 6 or 8, because as recently as the 1700s, tarpans still roamed the forest of northeastern Poland. During the Ice Ages, when glaciers blanketed northern Europe and a wind-ripped tundra stretched down the Mediterranean countryside, thick forests and fertile meadows gave refuge to great herds of tarpans that roamed the Central European lowlands, browsed the East European steppes, and galloped across Asia and the Americas. In the 5th century BC, Herodotus said how much he enjoyed watching herds of tarpans grazing in the bogs and marshes of what is now Poland. For ages, purebred tarpans outwitted all the hunters and somehow survived in Europe, but by the 18th century, not many remained, in part because diners prized tarpon meat. It was sweet, but more appealingly. It was rare, and in part because most tarpans had interbred with farm horses to pursue fertile offspring. In 1880, pursued by humans, the last wild tarpon mare fell down a crevasse in Ukraine and died. And the last captive tarpon died 7 years later in the Munich Zoo. At that point, the species officially became extinct. Just one more chapter in the annals of life on Earth. Humans domesticated wild horses about 6,000 years ago, and immediately began refining them, killing the defiant ones for food while breeding the most genial to produce a horse that submits more easily to saddle and plow. I did not know that. That explains a lot. In the process, we revise the horse's nature, compelling it to shed its zesty, ungovernable, evasive wildness. The aloof, free-range Przewalski horses retain that fury, and Heck planned to weave their combative spirit to the new Tarpan's genetic mix. History credits Colonel Nikolai Przewalski, a Russian explorer of Polish descent, with discovering the wild Asiatic horse, in 1879, hence its name. Though, of course, the horse was well known to the Mongolians, who had already named it Taki. Heck factored the Taki stamina, temper, and looks into his formula, but he craved even older creatures, the horses that dominated the prehistoric world. What a powerful idea. That sexy, high-strung horse. Never would have thought to say that about a horse. Pawing the ground in defiance, its hooves all declaratives. Heinz Heck wrote after the war that he and his brother had begun the backbreeding project out of curiosity, but also from the thought that if man cannot be halted in his mad destruction of himself and other creatures, it is at least a consolation if some of those kinds of animals he has already exterminated can be brought back to life again. But why have tarpans to ride if there was nothing worthy to hunt? Lutz Heck soon began ministering to a handful of European bison, including those he stole from the Warsaw Zoo, hoping that they might prosper in Baloesa's spirit house of trees, just as their ancestors had. Heck envisioned forest bison once again galloping along the trails, as sunlight speared through branches of 100-foot oaks, in a woodland throbbing with wolves, lynx, wild boar, and other game soon to be joined. He hoped by herds of ancient horses. Ah, crud. Heck also sought a legendary bull. God, I wish I knew how to pronounce half these words. Oryx. Once the largest land animal in Europe, known for its savagery and vigor. When Ice Age glaciers melted about 12,000 years ago, most giant mammals vanished. But in the cold forests of northern Europe, some Arshan survived, and all modern cattle have descended from those. Not that Arshan would have been easy to domesticate 8,000 years ago. Because the aurochs went extinct in the 1600s, recent in evolutionary terms, Heck felt that he could reconstruct it, and in doing so, save it from racial degeneration. He dreamt that alongside the swastika, the bull might become synonymous with Nazism. Some drawings of the area showed the aurochs and the swastika joined in the emblem of ideological sovereignty combined with ferocious strength. Many ancient cultures worshipped the aurochs bull, especially in Egypt, Cyprus, Sardinia, and Crete, whose trans-species rulers supposedly descended from a sacred bull. Zeus often assumed the shape of a bull in Greek myth, the better to ravage alluring mortals and produce offspring with magical gifts. When he abducted Europa, it was in the guise of an aurochs, the great black bull, with short beard and giant forward-pointing horns, like those on longhorn cattle, or in the helmets of heroes in the, oh god, it's a German word, Nibelungen. Roll with it. What better totemistic animal for the, oh no, oh snap. Aw, man, I gotta... Whoops. I forgot to leave caffeine on so that it wouldn't shut down after so many minutes of inactivity. Whoops. Okay, what better totemistic animal for the Third Reich? Heck's passion for the project was shared by top Nazi officials, making it clear that Heck's work was not just about the recreation of extinct species. After Hitler came to power, the biological aims of the Nazi movement spawned many projects to establish racial purity, which justified acts of sterilization, euthanasia, and mass murder. One of the Third Reich's key scientists, Heck's colleague and good friend Eugene Fischer, founded the Institute of Anthropology, Genetics, and Eugenics, which favored Joseph Mengele and other equally sadistic SS doctors who used concentration camp inmates as guinea pigs. Fascinated by violence and the red-blooded manly spirit, naturally brave, daring, fierce, hardy, sane, lusty, strong-willed, Eugene Fischer believed that mutations in human beings were as destructive as those in domestic animals, and that interbreeding was wilting the human race in the same way that it had already denatured certain beautiful, good, and heroic wild animals, losing the potent original in its genetic clutter. The roots of Nazism fed on a lively occultism that spawned the Thule Society, the Germany-Doran, and the Volkisch movement, Pan-Germanism, and other nationalist cults that believed in a race of Aryan god men and the urgency of exterminating all inferiors. They exalted superhuman ancestors whose ancient Gnostic rule had brought the Aryans wisdom, power, and prosperity in a prehistoric age until it was supplanted by an alien and hostile culture, namely Jews, Catholics, and Freemasons. Didn't know about Freemasons. These ancestors were supposed to have encoded their salvation-bringing knowledge in cryptic forms, runes, myths, traditions, which could be deciphered ultimately only by their spiritual heirs. This ideal of racial purity really bloomed with Konrad Lorenz, a Nobel scientist highly respected in Nazi circles, who shared Oswald Spengler's belief, popularized in The Decline of the West in 1920, that cultures inevitably decay, but not Spengler's pessimism. Instead, he turned to the domestication of animals as an example of how cultures decline, though haphazard breeding of robust and humdrum stock and championed a biological solution, racial hygienics, a deliberate, scientifically founded race policy, in which ruin is prevented by the elimination of degenerate types. Lorenz used the terms species, race, and Volk interchangeably, and warned that the healthy Volkish body often does not notice how it is being pervaded by elements of decay, describing that decay as a cancer of physically ugly people and arguing that each animal's goal in the survival of its species. He invoked an ethical commandment he claimed the Bible supported: "Thou shalt love the future of your Volk above all else." I actually don't know what that means. And called for dividing people between those of full value and those of inferior value, which included whole races and anyone born with mental or physical disabilities, purging the feeble, both in humans and animals. Heck agreed, aspiring to nothing less than recasting Germany's natural world, cleansing it, polishing it, and perfecting it. A true believer from the first stirrings of Nazism, Heck integrated himself with the SS, imbibed Fischer's and Lorenz's beliefs about racial purity, and became a favorite with Hitler, and especially Hermann Göring, his ideal patron. In this sanitary utopia, Heck's job essentially was to reinvent nature, and he found Göring a generous patron with deep pockets. In return, Heck wanted to give Göring dominion over Poland's greatest natural treasure, the fantastic lost-in-time preserve on the Polish-Belarusian border, Białowieża. As Heck appreciated, It made the ultimate gift for a man who stamped his coat of arms on most possessions and liked to dress in pseudo-medieval outfits of long leather jerkins, soft-top boots, and voluminous silk shirts, and go marching around his house in a state carrying a spear. What a freak. Many aristocrats held key positions in the Nazi Party, and most of the high command owned hunting lodges or estates. So, an important facet of Heck's job was bagging the best hunting preserves and stocking them in novel ways. Dotted with medieval castles, inheritor of Europe's only primeval forest, Poland boasted some of the finest hunting on the continent. Pre-war photographs place Goring at his sumptuously appointed hunting lodge northeast of Berlin on an estate stretching to the Baltic, complete with a 16,000-acre private reserve which he stocked with elk, deer, wild boar, and antelope, and other game animals. More broadly, the Nazis were ardent animal lovers, and how can you be animal lovers if you want to kill the sick ones? That doesn't make any sense. Whatever. And environmentalists who promoted calisthenics and healthy living, regular trips into the countryside, and far-reaching animal rights policies as they rose to power. Goring took pride in sponsoring wildlife sanctuaries, green lungs, as both recreation and conservation areas, and carving out great highways flanked by scenic vistas. They appealed to Lutz Heck as it did to many other world-class scientists, such as physicist Werner Heisenberg, biologist Karl von Frisch, and rocket designer Werner von Braun. Under the Third Reich, animals became noble, mythic, almost angelic, including humans, of course, but not Slavs, Gypsies, Catholics, or Jews. Although Mengel's subjects could be operated on without any painkillers at all, a remarkable example of Nazi zoophilia is that a leading biologist was once punished for not giving worms enough anesthesia during an experiment. That is absolutely insane and makes, no sense. Alright, I think I'm done with that one. It was really hard to get through.